All right, so welcome back to another episode of This with Krish show. I am your host, Krish Dokia. And now today, I'm talking about the Super Bowl halftime show, the internet's collective meltdown and what followed it, right? The name Bad Bunny has been getting dragged into places it probably never meant to be or should be, and the counter-programming moment that showed up in the form of Turning Point USA. And the All-American Halftime show that they had streaming, I think it was pre-recorded. It was on Rumble and YouTube Live and just a bunch of different places. So we're going to talk about all that. Jam-packed episode for all of you today. And I'm laughing because it's not funny. I'm going to be pretty serious throughout this episode, but I'm going to cover some things that transpired in the last 24 hours, and I think it was all very interesting. And guess what? You could not escape all of the noise on social media post Super Bowl, specifically the halftime show. So again, more than that, I'm talking about why every single year, without fail, we all managed to turn this football game into a cultural battlefield, right? Happened with Kendrick Lamar last year. And what this whole episode is going to actually reveal is where we are as a country, okay? Because let's just say it up front, right? The Super Bowl, it has not been just a football game for a very long time. It's been a advertising mecca. It's the cultural mirror we have in the United States. It reflects who we are, who we celebrate, what we argue about, what makes us uncomfortable, and what sends people straight to their cell phones to type something that they're probably going to regret, okay? And every year, we always act shocked, right, when all this stuff comes out. This year, the halftime show did what halftime shows have been doing for decades, okay? It leaned into spectacle, global appeal, big productions, loud visuals, heavy beats, vibes, lots of vibes, and it met a lot of people where they're at, right? And within minutes, it was absolute chaos online, right? One side is yelling, hey, this isn't America anymore. And the other side was yelling, look, you're just mad because you're old. I don't know, right? Meanwhile, 100+ million Americans were just trying to figure it out, right? If they had enough dip left for the fourth quarter or enough chicken wings and pizza, okay? Let's slow this down just a little bit. And I'd like to deal in facts instead of just feelings, believe it or not. Bad Bunny, you guys, did not hijack the Super Bowl, right? He didn't book himself, and if you listen to Candace Owens' podcast, she talks a little bit about it earlier today even, but something I didn't know, do you know who books the acts at for the Super Bowl? Jay-Z, somehow, right? So Jay-Z booked Bad Bunny to play the Super Bowl. He did not replace American artists. He did not sneak in some anti-American agenda disguised as choreography, although we were all expecting it, let's be honest. He is one of the most streamed artists on the planet. From a pure business standpoint, the NFL and Jay-Z made a decision based on business, okay? Yes, English is the primary language of the United States. We all agree that. Yes, a large portion of viewers had absolutely no idea what he was saying, including myself. Yes, that made some people feel disconnected. And guess what? All of that is fair. Fair. I'm not saying otherwise. But here's where the internet and all of you that were outraged completely fell apart. The idea that Bad Bunny is not American and because English is a second language is not an opinion. It's completely and factually wrong. Bad Bunny, if you didn't know this, is Puerto Rican. He's from Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico has been under the U.S. control for 127 years, right? Puerto Ricans have been United States citizens since, guess what, 1917. So no, you don't get to decide who's American based on what language they sing in, okay? Just because you don't understand it. You can say, yeah, you know what, Bad Bunny's not my style, or I don't know his songs. You can say, I didn't connect with it. You can say, I prefer English language halftime shows. You can totally say that, and that's all valid. But the second that criticism turned into, hey, guess what? They don't belong here. You're no longer talking about music, okay? You're talking about identity. And that's where credibility rather gets lost, right? And it gets lost super fast, no matter what side of the aisle you're on saying that. Let me be clear about something else. I personally am not a Bad Bunny fan, although that Monaco song has some good beats. I'm not walking around with a playlist on repeat, but I can still acknowledge reality, right? Come on, the beats were tight. The production was super polished. The stage design was super impressive, probably the best I've ever seen at the Super Bowl. The execution also was professional. I'm also not a Lady Gaga fan or who else was there? Ricky Martin. I'm not. But it was so well done, okay? Let's talk about the other half of this conversation. And while many of you would realize that I am conservative, right? Doesn't mean that I'm was anti Bad Bunny. But the halftime show was happening on TV. A parallel conversation was happening online, right? TPUSA released their All-American Halftime content with Kid Rock. It was pre-recorded, and suddenly the internet needed a scoreboard. TPUSA initially claimed around 6 million concurrent streams. Then depending on who you ask, and Andrew Kovac over at TPUSA said 20 million, right? That number grew to 20 million. And I don't know if that's true or not. We'll see. Are those numbers accurate? Okay, maybe, maybe not. But here's the part that actually matters. Okay, the Super Bowl itself, you guys, pulled in 120 million viewers. Think about that. 120 million viewers compared to 20 million. And they're stating that during the halftime, people that weren't actually watching the game, another 50 million joined in for the party. 135 million people watched the halftime. Subjectively, mathematically, removing the emotional Twitter math, right? The counter programming did not impact the Super Bowl halftime in any sort of meaningful way. It didn't siphon viewers. It didn't fracture the moment. It didn't disrupt the broadcast, right? And guess what? That's okay. At least in my eyes, the goal was never to beat the halftime show. That framing came later, mostly from people who needed, everything to be sort of like this winner-loser narrative. And what TPUSA actually did was create alternative content, right? For people who wanted it. Even the church that we attend, had kind of like this, Super Bowl halftime playlist for kids. Okay? Look, granted, nobody knew what was going to happen in the halftime. Sometimes crazy things happen, if you recall the whole Britney kiss on TV, or it was like I think it was Mariah Carey and Justin Timberlake. There was like some wardrobe malfunctions. We didn't know what Kendrick Lamar was going to do last year. I'd never even heard of Kendrick Lamar until last year. And it was a catchy song, but if you guys didn't know, again, there was Outrage there as well last year, but the whole thing was this diss song to Drake or something, apparently, on national television, right? But this alternative content, right, was for people that wanted it. It wasn't censorship. That's not sabotage. That's not extremism. That's not competition. Competition is one of the most American things there is. That's just the way we operate, y'all, right? Now here's where both sides need to just unclench their behinds just a bit. Okay, as all of you were so outraged, many of you were. If you watched the NFL halftime and loved it, and never once thought about TPUSA, that's great. Nothing was taken from you. Now, if you skipped the halftime and engaged with the All-American Kid Rock Fest, right? And I watched a little bit of both, by the way, then that's also fine. The problem only arises when either side pretends that the other one should not exist. Because that's not how America works, or at least it's not how it's supposed to work. But apparently everyone is fueled thinking that it ought to operate that way. This entire conversation stopped being theoretical for me a few days ago, right? Like, again, I'm conservative. That's not a secret, okay? But I wrote an article on the website, the media site, thiswithkrish.com, breaking down both the Super Bowl halftime show and the TPUSA All-American Halftime. Right, middle of the aisle, bipartisan, facts before feelings kind of article. That's how most of my content operates anyway. Right before halftime yesterday, okay, I took a snippet of the article, maybe it was a screenshot of the article, which I like to do, and then linked it and reposted it on my Instagram story. And then something sort of unexpected happens, right? And I have trolls all the time hitting me up, so it's not a big deal, right? But a guy I considered a friend many years ago, someone, lost touch and whatever, lives in a different, my former city in Atlanta. But this person follows me on Instagram, right? And responded with that kind of emoji, like DM me, the one where like it's a crying, laughing emoji, if you guys know what I mean. It's technically the universal symbol for I'm mocking you, but you don't want to say why, okay? Hide behind those emojis. So I asked him, I responded pretty quickly. I was like, hey, what's that? Why is that funny or something? And he replied, I'll let you critically think. You're smart. Okay. All right. I hear you. So I kind of responded playfully, and I stated, and I kind of already I was seething, I don't know why I was mad, but I was, sort of, I don't know. And I think I messaged him back something to the effect of, and that's why I put you on blast on one of those episodes before, or one of these episodes. And that was in reference to an episode I did about investing for your children and sort of avoiding these life insurance salesmen and their gimmicks. Nothing dramatic. I didn't call any one person out, but it's kind of about him. Anyway. And he comes back with a big Kid Rock fan, right? Question mark. And I sort of answered honestly, and I said, no, I'm just a Christian conservative. And that's when it hit me, right? Why this bothered me so much, this whole thing, this whole interaction. This particular person, like, I'm not going to say any names, has spent years posting nonstop sort of liberal content. A lot of it's misguided, a lot of it's fake news flavored, plenty of it is cringeworthy. And you know what I've never done before, you guys? I've never commented on any one of his posts, right? I've never mocked him, never tried to dunk on him, never shoved my politics down his throat, right? Because you can unfollow me if you don't like what I post. And I don't post anything that frequently, and nothing uber controversial, because I like to stay in the middle. I'm not leaning far in any direction, okay? But unlike him, right? I would say I understand how the world works, and social media, and common sense, and I understand how media distorts the truth. I understand how narratives are shaped. I understand that freedom of speech seems to be only celebrated when a left-leaning narrative is the one being pushed. And I had to say that because it's true. And the best part, if he had actually read the article that he laughed at, he would have realized it wasn't what he assumed it was, okay? But like so many people today, he jumped straight to conclusions and went looking for, I don't know, a fight maybe, I don't know. Not here, buddy, not here. Consider whatever tiny remnant of friendship that we had terminated, okay? I don't need that kind of negativity. I'm doing it on air. And then, right, just when I thought that this weird interaction couldn't get any more ridiculous, he ended it with, "That's great, brah. I'm smart and successful. Let's go." Smart and successful. Okay. Really? Says who? I have to ask. Says who? I don't think you're smart. or successful. It's all in the eye of the beholder, right? I'm still trying to figure out what being smart and successful has to do with mocking an article that you didn't read and then starting to flex in my DMs. So I'm sorry, brah, okay? But in my book, you're neither. But best of luck on that ego and that lack of class, okay? And I share that story because it perfectly sums up this entire episode. The Super Bowl controversies, okay? This wasn't about football. It wasn't about music. It wasn't about Bad Bunny. It wasn't even about TPUSA. Okay, I can never say that. It's a tongue twister. TPUSA. What it was about is assumptions. It was about narratives. It was about how quickly people are willing to mock something they don't actually understand, whether it's Kid Rock and TPUSA and that whole movement, or Bad Bunny and Lady Gaga and all this. Okay, the Super Bowl didn't divide America. America brought its divisions to the Super Bowl. Now, you can believe English is foundational to American culture and acknowledge that American citizens speak other languages. You can dislike an artist and admit the performance was still very well executed. You can support patriotic content without pretending it replaces anything. Those positions are always contradictory. Sorry, they're not. Sorry, I take that back. Those positions aren't contradictory, they are mature. And maturity doesn't trend, as you know, right? The real controversy wasn't the halftime show, it was how easily we all let ourselves be played by outrage. My buddy Tim Cox actually put up a post on Facebook, and I can really appreciate it, talking about why all of a sudden are we so freaking outraged? He didn't say it that way, but I can appreciate that post because people are realizing that we are all just trying to get one up on each other, man, and it's wild. It is wild. So shout out to Tim. Don't even know if he listens to my podcast, but he should. He's a good guy. But that's what actually happened, right? If this episode, you've made you think, maybe laugh, not that I said anything too funny, or pause before taking off on a hot take, subscribe, comment, share it with someone who lives in the comment section full time. Talking to you, you know who you are. You can always listen to this podcast stream across multiple platforms, and we'll continue to cut through the noise right here on This with Krish show. Now, before you go, real quick, I don't want to bury you with even more information, but we've got something big coming, an upcoming contest. I've talked about this, at the beginning of the year. We've been putting it together, tied directly to this show, to this audience, and this community. It's not a gimmick, it's not spammy, and it's definitely not something you're going to want to sleep on. Think of a scavenger hunt, okay? But I'm not dropping the full details just yet, but let's just say it's built for people who actually listen to this show, actually think, and actually engage. So more on that very soon. So make sure that you are subscribed, notifications are on, and you're following along, because when this drops, it's going to move fast, and there's a lot of money to be won, right? So, all right. Now, I'll see you very soon, right here on This with Krish show. And as always, I like to end with, I love y'all. See you next time. Bye.